Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's developer Q&A for the Miro developer platform. My name is Addison, and I'll be running today's Q&A session. But the main focus and main topic that I want to dive into today is a new feature that we just launched only a few days ago to our Web SDK. If you're a little bit new here or aren't familiar with the Web SDK, make sure you head to some of the other videos that we have hosted on our YouTube channel to check out more and learn a little bit more about some of the other main concepts that we'll be diving into today. I do also want to highlight in this session very quickly the new homepage that we also just launched today, November 16th. 2022. We have a brand new homepage. It looks great. It also gives you a lot more information about the Miro developer platform and some of the pieces that will help enable you to build the next big thing or whatever idea that you're interested in building to help you work better and smarter in Miro. And a lot of other resources in terms of where you can find things like our roadmap, join our Discord, which you might be watching this from, code samples from a GitHub, and also a community forum to get help more support-wise. And then some other resources and examples to even inspire you to, build something new. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is because we'll also be using some of the documentation today to talk about the said feature that we just launched a few days ago. I am going to head over to our changelog so we can talk and show you a little bit more about the feature we'll dive into. And this feature is Web SDK Connectors. So if you are familiar with a Miro board, chances are you have seen these items before. It essentially allows you to connect one or two more items together via a line. What this looks like in practice, if we aren't using the developer platform, let's say we have one sticky note here, and then we'll add another sticky note over here. It's the entity or item that allows you to connect the two just like this. There's a bunch of different customization options as well, like if you want to add an arrow on one side, if you want to add text in the middle, even the type, if you want it to be curvy, elbowed, or just straight, dashed or dotted, colors, and a whole lot more, including like the size and more. So we've just added this functionality to the Web SDK. It is also available via the REST API if you are building an app that way. But today I just want to dive into some of the new features, how it works in the Web SDK, and give you hopefully some inspiration if you all want to use this for one of your own apps. There is also just a little bit of code samples that will also tell you how to use this. I'm also going to show you what this looks like in practice outside of the SDK app and just in the console. If you are ever interested in just trying out the Web SDK, from the console instead of building an app and going through a few of the extra steps for setup, you can always just copy and paste code inside of the console inside of a browser, and you'll be able to run the command or the snippet that way. So I'm just going to paste exactly what I just copied from over here. This is what it should look like for us. And perfect, boom. So it basically, just to show you what had happened, we first created a shape using the create shape call. Then we created another shape called end using the create shape call. And then we're using the new one, create connector, with a bunch of different configuration options, which I'm going to show you as well, again, how this works. So now the thing that I'm going to show is pretty much the same as this code sample. So you can find it here and also in the documentation. And you can head to the Web SDK reference documentation for connectors to find more. If you are from the homepage, I'll show you where you can get that too. If you head to the Web SDK in the top navigation bar, head down to the Web SDK reference, expand this, and we are looking for connector. And all of the reference documentation, everything you need to know is inside of here. But instead of using this from the console, let's see what this looks like in a Web SDK app and maybe a more realistic application as well. So what I have going here is an already prepared demo. This is actually using the Create Miro app CLI tool, which will allow us to bootstrap an SDK app for us to use. I will also give a little bit of context on the configuration. This is using a bundler called Vit, which comes again with Create Miro app, and this is using the TypeScript and React configuration. Again, if you're new here, you can use a lot of different types of web technologies for the types of apps that you're building, but I've just chosen to do this in TypeScript and React for this specific use case. I will mention as well that I have this app already created in my Miro developer team. So if you are also new here and haven't done this yet and you want to build an app and you want it in the sidebar, there are a few more steps you need to take. If you head to our documentation and head to the Your App section or the Build Your App section in the upper right, you'll learn all about how to create your first app and get the SDK app running here instead of the console like I just demoed. And I have this one called local development, which will just tap into any localhost 3000 app that I have running. And I don't have that running yet, so I'm going to start this using yarn start. I'm just going to refresh this board so we can make sure that it's loaded correctly. One more moment. And now that it's loaded, whenever we click this, it will load the app that I have created. I'll take us through the code very quickly and show you how it works, and then we'll dive into some other use cases on how this might be useful. So the first thing that I want to mention is I have this app all created in source app.tsx. It contains some things like a color picker, a utility for adding the connector, a listener to listen to the different selection items that I have. As you see, this app is basically going to ask me to select items on the board. And then from there, we're able to connect the said items using a button, which we have here, and add the connector. So I'll dive back into this in a minute. Let me just take a second and show you how this works on the board. So very similarly, we could have something like a note, like note 1. Let's put another one down here, and I'll put this one called note 2. And essentially what happens is if we launch this app, it'll ask us to select 2 items on the board. So we have 1, but if we select 2, you'll see that it will basically allow us to choose a connector color and add a connector between the 2. So that's where this color picker comes in. I'm just using this from a library called React Color. This is on NPM as well if you want to use this. Have a few default colors here. You can add whatever colors that you want, but this is just going to display them in a nice kind of format that I like here. And we can use whatever color we want for the connectors. So I will just maybe use a red one for this instance. And adding the connector is going to put a connector between the 2. Now, actually put them in the wrong order. And actually, the reason that it did this was because I selected this one first. So this is actually going to be the first selection, and this is going to be the second. So actually, if I wanted to make sure that this is the first item to the second item, and we do the same, it now looks a little bit better where we have them on the right edges. But either way, it is kind of working as expected. I just had selected them in the wrong order. Now let's see how this works. So the first thing I want to point out is this use effect listener from React, which is going to initialize a selection update listener, which means every time that I select something on the Miro board, it's going to give me the returned item inside of its event items item inside of here. And what I'm doing is basically if I have 2 of them selected, I'm going to set both of those items inside of the state. Otherwise, I'm going to not keep them in the state. If I have 2 of them selected, I'm going to use this Boolean flag, which is either going to render, if I have 2 items selected, the UI that has the color picker and also a button to add the connector. Otherwise, it's going to have this message, as you see here, I don't have anything selected, so it's going to ask me to select 2 different items on the board. Now, the next important part here is the on-click, so the add connector, which is coming from the utilities that I have right here. Basically, what's happening is when I click this button, it's going to call the add connector function with a color coming from the color picker. I'm also using this in set state, so I'm just keeping all of this state from either my selection and the connector color there. And then also the selected items, so the first one and the second one, so we know which items to connect it to. And from here, this call might look pretty similar if you were watching the call from the console as well. It's basically just a function that is calling the create connector call from Miro. And I have some presets here like the shape, the style, that stroke color is being set from the color that we're passing in from the parameters up here. And the same thing for the start and end items as well. So we're doing the item one based on its ID, which we're saving again from that selection call from Miro, and the same thing with the second ID as well. So in practice, this maybe it could be pretty useful, but this is just, again, just a very simple example of how something like this works. Chances are, if you have these two selected, this workflow of selecting them and adding a connector might be even slower than just kind of going as you see here. So this use case maybe isn't super valid, but I want to start to kind of highlight some other use cases that might be useful, especially if you're doing a lot of templating. So if you have like templates saved and you want to insert them into a Miro board, but they contain a lot of connectors and a lot of lines, you can now use these from the web SDK. So when you insert it onto the board, everything's all connected and it will be more of a usable template in the sense that it's more completed. Another really good use case that we're starting to see some teams build is doing things like org charts as well. So if you are interested in building an app that allows you to either read maybe stuff from a CSV or even tap into an org chart database where you have it in a different tool, you should be able to use this really efficiently with the connectors and essentially import this data, whether that you import them as sticky notes or cards, and import them with lines connecting everything as you would normally see in like a tree or a org chart style. So again, this is just a new call that we added to the Web SDK a few days ago. Hopefully it's useful, but make sure you check out the documentation again at developers.miro.com and the Web SDK under the connector section to learn about all the different things that you can style, including the position of them. There's also a nice little graph on like what the coordinates mean in terms of them relative to the item itself. And also more information about the line style, like the color, thickness, and other parameters. But that's all I wanted to show today. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next one.